It was supposed to be just a stupid lie, a quick fix to shut my family up. But the second he walked back into my life, all the carefully built walls I had were crushed beneath the weight of a smirk I used to hate more than anything. Irony has a twisted sense of humor. It brought my rival back, not as an enemy this time, but as the fake boyfriend I desperately needed. I never imagined agreeing to something so insane. Me, the guy who once swore he'd rather die than talk to him again, now walking into my parents' house with his arms slung around my shoulder like we were star-crossed lovers instead of ex-teammates who nearly killed each other on the football field. The truth? I needed him, and God, I hated that more than anything. It started 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. My mom had been on my case for months about settling down, asking every Sunday dinner when she'd finally meet someone. My cousins paraded their girlfriends, their fiancés, their perfect little picture book romances, while I dodged questions with a forced laugh and another sip of soda. But that night, my sister leaned over with her smug grin and whispered, "If you don't bring someone home this year, Mom's gonna set you up with Pastor Richard's daughter again." I nearly choked. And that's how the ridiculous plan was born. A fake boyfriend, a stand-in, someone to hold my hand long enough to convince my family I wasn't a lonely, hopeless mess. The problem? I had no one to ask, no one I trusted enough, no one who'd play along without either spilling the truth or turning it into some joke. That is, until I saw him. It had been years since high school, years since we both quit the team and went our separate ways. But there he was, standing in line at a coffee shop downtown, looking almost exactly the same, except sharper, older, and with a jawline that had no right to be that distracting. Ethan Cole. My former quarterback, my former rival, the guy who stole plays from me, who threw passes like he owned the world, who smirked every time I messed up. We hated each other so much the coach had to bench us separately just to stop the shouting matches during practice. And yet, when I saw him standing there, with his easy grin and stupidly perfect hair, something in my chest twisted in a way I couldn't name. I should have walked out. I should have ignored him, but desperation does crazy things to a man. "Ethan?" My voice cracked like a teenager's. He turned, and for a second, I thought I imagined the flicker of surprise in his eyes. Then came that smirk, the same one that haunted me years ago. Well, look who's still alive. Didn't think I'd see you in this town again, Carter." Carter, my last name. He always said it like a challenge. I hated it, and I hated that I missed it. We sat across from each other, coffee cups between us, silence stretching until he leaned back and said, "So, what's the deal? You stalking me? Or just desperate for company?" I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I blurted out the truth. Not all of it, but enough. "I need a boyfriend. Just for Thanksgiving." His brows shot up, and for the first time, Ethan Cole was speechless. Then he laughed so hard the barista shot us a look. "You're serious?" "Yes," I snapped. "It's not like I'm asking for forever. Just a week. Pretend. You're good at pretending anyway." His laughter faded, replaced by something sharper in his gaze. "And why me? Out of everyone in this godforsaken town, why would you pick me?" I hesitated, swallowing the pride I'd carried for years. "Because you're the only one who could make it believable." He agreed, maybe out of boredom, maybe out of curiosity, or maybe because he loved watching me squirm. But from that moment, everything spun out of control. The first time he held my hand in front of my family, my mom nearly cried with joy. My sister winked like she'd known all along. And Ethan, he played the part too well. He whispered things in my ear that made me blush, looked at me with eyes that seemed too real, too tender for the act we were pulling off. I told myself it was fake. I told myself it was just a game. But the way my chest tightened every time he smiled at me, the way his hand lingered on mine long after the show was over, it felt anything but pretend. And maybe, just maybe, that terrified me more than anything. Dinner with my family had always been a war zone disguised as a meal. But that night, with Ethan sitting beside me, I realized it was no longer just a war between me and my mother's expectations. It was a minefield where every step could blow our cover. The worst part? Ethan looked like he was born for it. He charmed my mom in less than 5 minutes, complimented her cooking, laughed at her stories, even helped her bring out the pumpkin pie like he'd been part of our family for years. My dad gave him the kind of approving nod I had never seen directed at me. And my cousins? They were practically hanging on his every word. Meanwhile, I sat there, watching him play the role of perfect boyfriend with such effortless grace that I almost forgot it wasn't real. Almost. "Carter," my mom said, smiling so brightly I thought her face might crack. "How long have you and Ethan been, together?" The table went silent. Every fork froze midair. My heart stopped beating. But Ethan didn't even flinch. He slipped his hand into mine under the table, fingers threading through like it was second nature. My breath caught. "A year," he said smoothly, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. I didn't want to push him to tell everyone until he was ready. My mom gasped like she'd just won the lottery. My sister smirked knowingly. And I was trying not to pass out. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I cornered him in the guest room he was supposed to stay in. "What the hell was that?" I hissed. He raised an eyebrow, leaning back against the wall with that same infuriating smirk. "You're welcome. I just saved your ass. You should be thanking me." "You said a year. That's insane, Ethan. Do you realize what that means? They're going to expect us to know everything about each other." "Relax," he drawled. "It's not like I don't know you. We've spent enough years yelling at each other on the field. I know how you take your coffee. I know you always double tie your laces. And I know you grind your teeth when you're stressed. Trust me, I've got this." His words hit harder than they should have. He noticed those things. Back then, I shook it off. This isn't a game. For once, his smirk faltered. He looked at me, really looked at me, and his voice softened. "I know." The following days were chaos. My mom dragged us to family brunches, shopping trips, and even church, introducing Ethan to everyone like he was some prized jewel. And every time, Ethan played his role flawlessly. His hand on my back, his easy compliments, his laugh that made people lean closer. But when it was just the two of us, the lines blurred. One evening, we sat on the porch swing after another exhausting day of pretending. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the air crisp with autumn chill. Ethan nudged me with his shoulder. For a fake boyfriend, I'm pretty damn good at this." I rolled my eyes. "Don't let it get to your head." But then he tilted his head, studying me. "Why me, really? You could have asked anyone else. Why the guy you used to hate?" I stared at him, words sticking in my throat. I wanted to say it was because he was convincing, because my family would believe it. But the truth was Messier. Because even when we were rivals, he was the one person who could make me feel alive. Because the fire between us never went out, it just changed shape. "I don't know," I muttered instead, looking away. He didn't press, but I felt his gaze linger, heavy and unreadable. The shift happened slowly, like frost melting under the morning sun. The night before Thanksgiving, my sister barged into the living room, phone in hand. "So," she said with a wicked grin, "how did you two even get together? I want the full story." I froze. But Ethan, damn him, didn't. He launched into a tale about bumping into me at a gas station, about me spilling coffee on his shirt, about me stammering through an apology while he pretended to be annoyed but secretly thought it was cute. Everyone laughed. My sister swooned. And I wanted to scream because his version was too charming, too sweet, too believable. Afterward, When we were alone, I shoved him lightly. "You made me sound like an idiot." He grinned. "Relax. You made me sound like a hero. Balance." But then his expression shifted, serious again. "Besides, it could have happened like that." Something in my chest cracked. The more time I spent with him, the harder it was to tell where the lie ended and the truth began. The way he held my hand no longer felt like an act. The way his eyes softened when he looked at me felt dangerously real. And I hated myself for wanting it to be real. Because sooner or later this would end. Thanksgiving would be over, he'd walk away, and I'd be left with nothing but memories of what could have been. Still, when he brushed a strand of hair from my face one night, his fingers lingering on my jaw, I didn't pull away. For a moment the world went silent. His eyes dropped to my lips. My heart thundered so loudly I thought he could hear it. But then he pulled back, jaw tight, like he was holding something in. And I realized with a jolt of terror and hope, he was fighting it too. The breaking point came on Thanksgiving night. After dinner, after the endless questions and family games, I found Ethan standing alone in the backyard, staring up at the stars. The cold air bit at my skin, but the look on his face burned hotter than fire. "You okay?" I asked quietly. He turned, and for once, the smirk was gone. This was supposed to be fake, Carter. Just a game. But his voice cracked. He shook his head. I don't know when it stopped feeling that way. My breath caught. My chest ached. Because I felt it too. Every moment with him, every touch, every glance. It had all been too much, too real. I stepped closer, my voice barely a whisper. "So what do we do now?" For a long moment, neither of us moved. The air between us was heavy with everything we hadn't said. Then, slowly, like he was afraid I'd push him away, Ethan reached for my hand. And this time I didn't let go. The thing about lies is that they always demand more of you than you expect. What began as a simple cover-up turned into an intricate web of half-truths, stolen glances, and feelings I had no business catching. By the time Friday rolled around, I was unraveling. The house was buzzing with relatives, laughter echoing from every room, but all I could think about was Ethan, the way he'd looked at me in the backyard last night, the way his voice cracked when he admitted it didn't feel fake anymore, and the way I couldn't sleep because of it. I found him the next morning in the kitchen, shirt half-tucked, hair messy, like he'd just rolled out of bed. He was pouring coffee into 2 mugs, and without asking, he slid one toward me. "You still take it black, right?" he asked casual. I froze. That detail, that memory, he shouldn't have known it, but he did. I wrapped my hands around the mug, more for warmth than anything else. "You remembered." Ethan leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee with that frustrating ease. "Of course I remembered. You used to glare at anyone who tried to put cream in it, like they'd committed some kind of crime." I almost smiled. Almost. Instead, I muttered, "You notice too much." He smirked. "Maybe you don't notice enough." And just like that, the air between us grew heavy again. The second act of our performance came that evening. My mom insisted on taking family photos, everyone dressed up, standing in front of the fireplace like a Hallmark card. I tried to keep my smile neutral, but Ethan made it impossible. His arm was draped over my shoulders, his palm warm against my neck. Every time the camera clicked, he leaned in a little closer, whispering things that made my cheeks burn. "You're blushing," he murmured once, just for me. "Shut up," I hissed, elbowing him lightly. He chuckled, low and dangerous, and I knew my family saw a happy couple instead of 2 idiots barely keeping it together. When the last picture was taken, my mom clasped her hands together and sighed. You two are perfect for each other. Perfect. The word clung to me long after everyone else had gone to bed. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I found him in the guest room, scrolling on his phone like he had no care in the world. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. He raised an eyebrow. Sounds serious. It is, I snapped, pacing the room. This is getting out of hand. My family thinks we're God, they think we're in love. And you're not helping. Bye. By what? He interrupted, voice calm. By looking at me like that. By touching me like you mean it. By... I broke off, breath shaking. Ethan put his phone down slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. And what if I do mean it? The room spun. My pulse hammered in my ears. You don't? I whispered, more to myself than him. But he stood, crossing the space between us until we were inches apart. His voice was low, almost tender. You think I'd go through all this, play this role, just for fun? I said yes because I wanted an excuse to be close to you again. Again. The word hit me like a punch. You hated me, I said weakly. I never hated you, he said, eyes burning into mine. I hated that I couldn't stop noticing you, that every time you fought me, pushed me, challenged me, I wanted you more, and I hated myself for it. Silence, heavy, suffocating. I didn't move when his hand lifted to cup my jaw. I didn't move when his forehead touched mine. But when his lips brushed mine, soft and hesitant, I shattered. It wasn't fireworks or some grand explosion. It was quiet, gentle, the kind of kiss that didn't demand but asked. A question, a plea. And I answered. I kissed him back, my hands fisting in his shirt, years of rivalry and denial crashing down in that single moment. When we finally broke apart, breathless, his smile was different, softer, vulnerable. This is a disaster, I muttered, my chest tight. Maybe, he admitted, but it's our disaster. The next few days blurred. We still played our parts for my family, but behind closed doors something shifted. His touches lingered longer. My walls cracked wider. One afternoon, we drove out to the old football field, empty and silent in the winter air. The bleachers were rusted, the scoreboard broken, but stepping onto that grass brought back memories so sharp they almost hurt. This place, Ethan said, looking around, feels like another lifetime. Yeah, I agreed softly. We sat on the 50-yard line, shoulders touching. For once, there was no pretense, no audience. Just us. Do you ever think about it? He asked suddenly. About what? About what it could have been, if we hadn't spent all our time fighting. I swallowed hard. Maybe we fought because it was easier than this. He turned to me, eyes searching. And what is this? I didn't answer. I kissed him instead. But nothing that good lasts without consequences. The Saturday after Thanksgiving, everything cracked. We were helping my mom clean up after brunch when my cousin Jake, loud, nosy, and always a little too observant, leaned over with a grin. So, Carter, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. If you two have been together a year, I guess you're gonna propose soon, huh? The room erupted in laughter, but my stomach dropped. I choked on my drink, sputtering, while Ethan froze beside me. Propose? My mom repeated, eyes wide with delight. Panic surged. This was spiraling too far. Before I could speak, Ethan laughed it off, making some joke about not rushing things. But the damage was done. The expectations had shifted. That night, when the house was finally quiet, I stormed into his room. This is exactly what I was afraid of, I snapped. They're expecting more. They're expecting forever. And when the truth comes out, because it will, we're both screwed. Ethan didn't fight back. He just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Maybe I want forever. My heart lurched. Don't say that. Why not? He asked, finally looking up. His eyes were raw, unguarded. Why is it so impossible to believe that I want this? That I want you? Because I was terrified. Terrified that he meant it, and even more terrified that he didn't. So I said the only thing I could. Because this was never supposed to be real. The words hung between us, sharp and final. And the silence that followed was worse than any fight we'd ever had. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The hurt in his eyes when I told him it wasn't supposed to be real. The way his jaw clenched like he was swallowing back everything he wanted to say. The house was too quiet, the air too heavy. It felt like the walls themselves knew I'd screwed everything up. By morning, Ethan was gone. His duffel bag had vanished from the guest room, the bed neatly made as if he'd never been there at all. The only proof he hadn't been a figment of my imagination was the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the hallway. My chest caved in. I told myself it was for the best, that cutting it off now would save me the heartbreak later. But the lie tasted bitter. Because the truth was, it already hurt like hell. The weekend crawled by. My family noticed something was wrong, of course. My mom fussed, my sister raised her eyebrows, and my dad asked quiet questions I couldn't answer. I avoided them all, burying myself in chores, in anything that kept me from thinking about him. But thinking about him was all I did. The way he laughed at my mom's stories, the way his hand fit perfectly in mine, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only person in the room. God, I missed him. And hating myself for it didn't make it stop. On Sunday night, I drove. No destination, no plan. Just the need to move, to breathe somewhere he hadn't touched. But somehow I ended up at the football field. The place was deserted, the air biting cold. The bleachers creaked in the wind, and the scoreboard loomed like a ghost from the past. I sat on the 50-yard line, my breath clouding in the air, and let the memories crash over me. This was where it all started. The fights, the rivalry, the tension that had always been more than hatred. I'd spent years convincing myself it was just competition, that the fire between us was about winning. But sitting there alone, I couldn't lie anymore. It had always been him. Even when I hated him, I wanted him. Even when I swore I'd never speak to him again, I was still listening for his voice in a crowd. And when he kissed me, it hadn't felt like a mistake. It had felt like the truth. I buried my face in my hands and whispered to the empty field, "I'm such an idiot." The following week dragged. I returned to work, forced smiles, and ignored the constant buzz of my phone. Ethan didn't call. He didn't text. And every day that passed without him felt heavier. My sister noticed, of course. She cornered me in the kitchen one evening, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You want to tell me why your so-called boyfriend disappeared in the middle of the night?" she asked. I froze. "He had to go." "Don't give me that," she snapped. "You looked like you were going to cry at dinner, and now you walk around like someone died. What happened?" I opened my mouth, then shut it again. Because how could I explain it? How could I tell her that my fake boyfriend had become the only thing I wanted, and I'd ruined it because I was too scared to believe it was real? Her expression softened, just slightly. "Carter, you liked him. It wasn't a question." I swallowed hard. "Yeah. And he liked you back," she added, voice gentler now. I didn't answer, but my silence was enough. Friday night, I found myself back at the coffee shop where this whole disaster began. The same barista, the same hum of conversation, the same smell of roasted beans. I sat at the table we'd shared that day, half hoping he'd walk in, half praying he wouldn't. He didn't. Instead, I replayed every moment in my head. The fake smiles, the real touches, the confessions we hadn't been brave enough to finish. And for the first time, I admitted the truth to myself. I didn't want a fake boyfriend. I didn't want a cover story. I didn't want to keep pretending. I wanted Ethan. The next morning, I made a choice. It wasn't brave, not really. My hands shook the entire drive, my chest tight with fear. But fear had kept me silent too long. I pulled up outside his apartment complex, heart pounding like I'd just run laps around the field. The building was older, brick walls weathered, but it was undeniably his. I stood outside his door for a full 5 minutes, debating whether to knock. What if he told me to leave? What if he laughed in my face? But then I thought of his voice, low and raw, when he'd said, "Maybe I want forever," and I knocked. The door opened slowly, revealing Ethan in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, his hair a mess. He blinked at me like I was a hallucination. "Carter," I swallowed. My throat was dry, my voice rough. "Hey!" He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me with those unreadable eyes. "I came to say I'm sorry," I rushed out. "For what I said, for pushing you away. I was scared, and I screwed it up, and—" "Stop," he interrupted, his tone sharp. My heart sank. But then he stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Do you mean it?" I nodded, desperate. "Yeah, I mean it." For a moment, he just looked at me, searching my face like he was afraid of being fooled. Then, slowly, his shoulders relaxed, and the corner of his mouth lifted in that infuriating, familiar smirk. "You're late," he said softly. Before I could ask what he meant, he pulled me in and kissed me. This time, it wasn't hesitant. It wasn't careful. It was desperate, hungry, like he'd been waiting for this as long as I had. And when I kissed him back, I knew. It was real. We didn't fix everything in that one kiss. Life isn't that simple. But for the first time, I wasn't running. For the first time, I believed we could make it work. Because the truth wasn't that I needed a fake boyfriend to fool my family. The truth was, I'd needed him all along. And maybe, just maybe, he needed me too. Life after the truth was both harder and easier than I expected. When Ethan and I decided to stop pretending and start actually being, I thought the sky might fall. That my family would look at me differently, that the world would close in with its opinions and judgments. But what actually happened was quieter, almost anticlimactic. My mom cried, of course she did. Not because I was with a boy, but because she realized how long I'd been carrying the fear of telling her. She hugged me until I couldn't breathe and whispered, "I just wanted you to be happy, Carter. That's all I ever wanted." My dad nodded, stoic as always. But later he slipped Ethan a handshake that lingered just long enough to mean something. And my sister? She smirked, told me she already knew, then demanded Ethan join her trivia team next week. It wasn't perfect. Some relatives frowned, some avoided the subject altogether. But for once, I didn't feel like I had to fight the world alone. Ethan was beside me, and that made all the difference. The weeks that followed were a blur of learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with pretending. I learned Ethan was terrible at cooking but insisted on trying anyway, burning pancakes while laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. I learned he liked to fall asleep with music playing, soft rock from the 90s that made him nostalgic. I learned he hated mornings but loved late-night drives, the kind where the windows were down and the world felt endless. And he learned me. He learned how I tapped my fingers when I was thinking, how I drank too much coffee on stressful days, how I still kept my old cleats in the closet even though I hadn't touched a football in years. We learned how to argue without destroying each other, how to listen without running, how to love without doubting. And for the first time in my life, love didn't feel like a battlefield. Felt like home. Of course, the world didn't magically disappear. There were whispers, stares, the occasional cruel word when we walked too close in town. But we met it together. One night, after some guy muttered something ugly under his breath as we left the diner, I felt the old fire rise in my chest. My fists itched, my jaw tightened, but before I could move, Ethan squeezed my hand. "Not worth it," he murmured. I looked at him, ready to argue, but his calm gaze melted my anger, and suddenly I understood. We weren't fighting to prove ourselves to the world anymore. We were just living, and that was enough. Summer came, warm and golden. One evening, Ethan drove us out to the lake where we used to run drills during preseason. The field was gone, replaced by water and wild grass, but the dock was still there, creaking under our weight as we sat side by side. The sky was painted with fire, orange, pink, purple bleeding into each other. The water mirrored it perfectly, a canvas of light and reflection. Ethan leaned back on his hands, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" he asked. "All the time," I admitted. He glanced at me, his smile small but real. "I don't regret it, though. Not the fights, not the years we wasted hating each other. Because it brought us here." I studied him, the way the sunset painted his skin gold, the way his eyes held both mischief and tenderness. And for the first time, I believed him. "I don't regret it either," I whispered. He reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together, and the silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was full. We stayed there until the stars appeared, the night wrapping around us like a promise. When Ethan finally spoke again, his voice was quiet but steady. "You know, this started with you needing a fake boyfriend." I laughed softly. "Yeah, worst plan I ever had." "Best plan," he corrected, turning to press a kiss to my temple. "Because it wasn't fake. Not really." And sitting there, with his warmth beside me and the universe above us, I realized he was right. It had never been fake. Not the rivalry, not the banter, not the fire that burned between us. It had always been something real, something waiting for us to stop running. And now, finally, we weren't running anymore. The story didn't end with fireworks or a grand declaration. It ended with something better, quiet, steady, enduring. Two boys who once swore they hated each other, now sitting together at the edge of the world, finally brave enough to admit what they'd known all along. I didn't need a fake boyfriend to fool my family. I just needed Ethan. And somehow, against all odds, he needed me too. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.